Hello, this is Lex, and welcome to the Nextep Remote Podcast, where I have the pleasure to interview some of the best remote work experts from all over the world. In each episode, we cover a topic, success story, or challenge to help you make remote work work. Enjoy! Wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, where I will try to answer the question, can you work remotely and continue to innovate as an organization? And I have invited Fredrik Heghammar along for the ride. Fredrik is the co-founder of House of Sparks, a Stockholm-based consultancy which supports organizations to ignite ideas and turn them into action through education. He is an expert in innovation and digital production with extensive blue-chip and high-profile experience. Prior to co-founding House of Sparks, he lived in the Big Apple and worked for Google Creative Lab and Anomaly. Also, he is a guitar geek who has just launched a new guitar amplifier brand. Well, Fredrik, thank you very much for coming on the show. And first of all, tell us more about the amplifier brand.
Thank you for having me. The amplifier brand is called Insulander Amplification. It was kind of a dream because I'm a guitar geek, as you said. To launch your own amplifier was kind of a dream of mine. And I was thinking, I help companies to innovate every day, so why not, use my own medicine? So that's what we did. Yeah, it's been super fun. It's been a year now, and we have everything is hand built, and they built on order. So I think we have released around 25 now or so. So that's kind of cool.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. It's the little passion projects that kind of keep us going.
Yeah.
And I like that you take your own advice. Let's put it this way, in terms of innovation. That's really, really good to hear.
Yeah.
Talking of innovation, big topic, and the question that I've come across actually today. I was reading a very interesting article that was asking that question of what companies can do, how they can do it, and whether it's even possible. So I guess my first question to you is, what have you seen over the past few months? What has been going on for you, and what have you seen in the lines of work that you do with House of Sparks?
So first of all, unfortunately, I would say that a lot of companies have done nothing, and that's my biggest takeaway, unfortunately. But the few ones that are keeping up the speed, I mean, they are working as normal, basically taking the time and understanding that this is a window of opportunity in this crazy thing that happens to us right now, the pandemic, or this COVID thing. It's horrible, but at the same time, it's a perfect landscape for innovation because people are open to try new things now, and some companies, the really smart ones, they are taking care of that opportunity, I would say. But there's just a few of them. And it's, of course, different depending on countries and stuff like that. But in Sweden, we haven't closed things down, but a lot of people work from home. And at least my experience is that a lot of people that are working from home right now, I don't know if they work or what they do, but probably more garden work than actually work. And so I think no one really expected this to be this time frame on this. I think most people maybe thought, a month or so, and then we're good to go. But so I see a lot of people running around in circles now with no plan. And so that's the biggest takeaway right now.
Absolutely. I've seen something similar. And the way I've been describing is that the companies have been holding their breath, basically, waiting for things to blow over, to understand and see how things transpire, what comes out of it. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of, I would think, an understandable way of doing it. But as you say, now is the time to innovate. I think companies are running out of breath, and we now got a slightly better idea how long things will last and what the consequences might be later in the year. And innovation is a big part of it. And I think they need to start addressing that as amongst other key things.
Yeah.
And especially where businesses now have to move online. You said different countries do a different approach. I know Sweden had no official lockdown, but people were still working from home. UK had an official lockdown. Most countries in the EU and around the world as well. They will have to change how they work. So
Yeah.
there's no way around innovation. What can they do? How can we manage? Because one of the biggest fears when it comes to remote working and innovation is, big ideas come when we are huddled together in a room or around a desk or around a whiteboard and whatever, and that physical presence that you get those, clashes and sparks flying, house of sparks.
Yeah.
So what can they do? Okay, they've now gone out of lockdown. They realized they need to continue working from home, but they need to innovate. What do they do?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, the biggest obstacle when you work with innovation with companies, if you ask them, if you really ask them, why are you not innovating more than you do? It's always quiet in a room, and if there's a woman in the room, she will be the one who answer and said, we're afraid of failing. And then when we talk about failing, it's always about time and money, And right now they have the time. A lot of companies have time. People are home; they have the time because they can't do other types of work, but they can spend time on this. Another obstacles is also we're not digital enough. We don't have the right tools and stuff like that. And I think this period is crazy period once again have proven that we have the tools. No one can say that we don't have the tools to work remotely. And I think also that a lot of people kind of gained confident in doing so as well, which is great. So with that said, another obstacle is people don't think they're creative enough, and that has to do with process on how you're working and stuff like that. And now when you have the tools in place, you have the time, there's actually nothing that's holding you back. But I think the last step to actually make it happen is to have a process to work around, and find the real challenges to solve real problems, because people are tired of let's innovate, and then they have a brain session and then something ends up on post-it notes and nothing happens with it. So people need to have a plan for what they're doing and why, and then also they need the stakeholder, of course, to actually take care of the ideas, because it's no problem to come up with ideas. The problem is to do something with them. And a good start, if you work remotely, is to have like an innovation platform tool. For example, I work with a tool called Hives. You can find it on hives.co, which is a great tool to invite people around a topic or a challenge and come with ideas. And then you can follow the idea in a systematic way from, challenge to prototype, maybe, or maybe a product. So I think, my tips for people that want to start innovating on remotely is to, create a super simple process from A to B, sort of how you can go from A to B, and then let people know about it, and then invite them to be a part of it.
The question I often get asked is what tools to use. And my answer tends to be, it's not the tools, it's how you use them. Because there are so many collaborative platforms, so many file storages and so on. You've got Muriel, you've got Coda, you've got Notion, you name it, there's a tool for it. And so it's more absolutely, as you say, about that process. And it's good to hear coming from you that it starts with that companies would need to start. And it doesn't have to be complicated, does it?
No, not at all. And actually, most companies nowadays, for good and bad, have Office 360, or Office 365, it's called, right? The Microsoft product, you can do everything in there. You just have to set the rules for what, this is how we're going to innovate. You set up a thing in Team, and you work with this way and you that way, and you can do everything in Teams. Is it the best tool out there? No, not at all. But you have it, so why don't use it? So you can't blame technology anymore. it's about using it the right way. And I think that's where the facilitator role is so important, and that's what I help companies with. As you said, we help people to educate them on how to do this themselves, but most often I start with helping them out as a facilitator. And it's no rocket science at all, but I have a process and I stick to that process, and that's why it works every single time.
How have you found doing these kind of the difference between, because obviously it's far better to have workshops face to face, because the interaction is better, you can read the body language and so on. So we are getting to the point of Zoom fatigue. I guess what process do you follow in a very, very shortened way in terms of running a workshop like that? If an organization wanted to do one internally, what would you suggest that they do? What process would they follow?
So first of all, I have to say that my experience during this period, since I've been forced to work remotely and do it, I mostly do it in Teams or Zoom. The end result, there's no difference in the end result from a live session, face-to-face session. The end result is as good, but the process is a little bit boring to me. I like to interact with people, as you said, and push them in the right direction, stuff like that. But the end results tends to be as good as the physical one, which is a good start. So when I work with both physical and online, and I actually I use the same process. I've just taken away a few steps in the digital one, because rule number one is you have to be over clear on instructions. It doesn't help if you have a slide where the actual instruction is written down in a very simple language. You have to tell them 10,000 times. That's the first thing. But the trick I've been using in both physical and online is that you always start individually. So instead of working with Post-its, I pre-set up a document to each participant, and that will be their Post-its. First of all, it's for documentation, because we document everything. But we start individual, and that allows people to kind of brain dump their thoughts. Of course, we work first with having a safe environment that tell them that nothing is good and nothing is bad until we prove it to be good or bad. We're here to fail together, because we know we're going to fail a lot to be able to succeed. So we start individual in like 5 or 10 minutes, depending on the challenge, but maximum of 10 minutes. And then I kind of put them in smaller groups to tell the others about their the things they have wrote down individually. And that kickstarts the conversation and makes it really everybody contributes. Otherwise, we know that if I'm a group of 5, I know exactly who's going to lead that group and take over and talk. But if you do it like this, and you also give them time restrictions, then you force them to contribute, sort of, but in a friendly way. So that's the trick. So go quantity to find quality, and then you tell them to discuss and pick a few to present to the others, and then you keep narrowing it down, like the double diamond method.
Thank you very much for sharing that very practical approach, and that companies can take away and use it. Obviously, you are always the external facilitator in an organization that comes in. I'm guessing the role of a facilitator is very key. So even if an organization wants to do it themselves internally, they need to have that one person, would be a product manager or somebody from that, I'm guessing.
Yes, it really helps to have someone who's not in the actual workshop, or a contributor, a separate facilitator. I think is the best. But I've been working with the Google design sprint methodology as well, where you are more contributing as a facilitator. But I like to be a neutral part, and not the one that helps them to come up with things. I might push them in the right direction, but they are the one who solves the problem, and it actually gives them more confidence and strength in the end. And also they usually know their business better than I do, actually. So I think, and I believe in the power perspectives, as we talked about, or as I talk about. That's the key to everything. So you kind of need to get everybody on board and contribute, because it's usually, this is my experience, I might be wrong, but it's usually not the one who talks the most that comes with the best ideas. It's usually the quiet one. Because you haven't heard that person's perspective before, and that's usually the quiet one that asks the questions that kind of opens up the Pandora's box, sort of.
Yeah, it tends to be the quiet ones that they don't obviously talk much, but once they say something, the rest of the room often goes silent, and it's very important to have people like that.
But if you are the facilitator at the workshop, a really good thing is to set a really clear agenda. And for that, I use something called I Do Art. I think it's the Chaos Pilots that came up with it, but I Do Art, it stands for intention, desired outcome, rules, responsibilities. I do. A is for agenda, rules, responsibility, and time. So usually I say, the desired outcome today is la la la. We're going to come up with a new wheel for a car. Okay. The time, the agenda is that first we'll do this and then we'll do that. The rules, I'm the facilitator, you are the contributors. And then also, this is a safe zone, ask twice, have fun, bounce the ball and stuff like that. And then be very clear on timing and breaks, because people are so worried about, when can I have my next break? Which they usually totally forget about when you start working, but in the first thing. Another good thing is if you, for example, use Zoom, is that you are in the control of the breakout sessions. So as I said, we always start individually, and then I divide them into groups of maximum 5 people. And I, as a facilitator, can send them out in separate breakout rooms. And I'm not letting them know, the participants in that breakout room, because people are so worried of being in the wrong group, So that's also a good tip, is not to tell them about which group they're going to be in, because they will increase their anxiety, unfortunately.
I think it's so important in any setting, workshop or non, remote or face-to-face. Agenda and sticking to the time, so important. I find it personally very frustrating when things run over. And if, sometimes there's reason, because the discussion is really good. It's a shame to interrupt it, but sometimes it's just poor management of the meeting that
absolutely
that kind of gets in the way.
The tip of the day: I Do Art. Google it. It's amazing. You can also Google how what's her name? Very famous talk show host.
Oprah Winfrey?
Oprah Winfrey. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, crazy. But she also has, when she enters a meeting, she asks 3 things. I never remember those 3 things. But if you can't answer those 3 things, she just turn around and leave. And I think, it sounds harsh, but I think it's really good. And another tip of the day, if you do I Do Art, start every meeting with giving people 5 minutes of reflection, individually, silent in the room. You run around like crazy, and you never prepare enough. So just give everyone 5 minutes to actually reflect why they are in the room, and reflect on the agenda quietly, individually, before you start the meeting. You will have 1,000% a better meeting.
That is probably the biggest nugget that I absolutely love. Couldn't agree more.
Super simple, but yes, it's a simple small simple things that makes the difference.
But one of my favorite ways of looking at a meeting is to make a meeting productive. I've never done it. I've been tempted so many times, but it was to remove all the chairs from the meeting room. Because then that people they're not gonna waffle. They'll focus and they'll concentrate. Obviously, if you're having a half-a-day workship, maybe not the best of ideas, but it makes you think. But it's, as you say, it's the little things. It's moment of reflection.
But also it has to be structured enough, so because people are also, if you're a leader by nature, for example, you will take lead. If there's no chairs in the room, you will let's find another room, or let's sit on the floor, and people are very creative sometimes, and some people are very fast of being creative, and they can ruin your plan if you if the plan is too wacko, sort of.
Obviously, the chair and the no chair scenario wouldn't work when we work remotely. Everybody's
That's
got
true.
their chair, and good luck to the facilitator trying to remove them, right? Coming back to innovation, we talked about it's obviously a change management process as well for any organization. As you said, you can only do so much as a facilitator. It's the organization that needs to do all the legwork, and any change can and probably should be kickstarted with some sort of workshop, or have some sort of starting point. Where I see innovation workshop and sprints like you do them as part of the process, but we both know it doesn't work that way, that it's just one workshop and they can get on with it. It is something that takes time, and the way I work with my clients, my organizations, is the fact we start with a workshop, and then it's at least a 3-month process where we touch base regularly, that I'm available to talk to people to support them through whatever they're doing. They need to continue doing the work. You and I talked about a couple of models, and I'm not sure whether this is the one that we can apply to, but you mentioned the Knoster T.
That's usually what I use. Yes, it's a model for complex change. And every time I have meeting with a senior management or a board or something like that, I show this model for managing complex change, and they usually look at each other and nod. So basically, it's about 5 different segments that you have to have in place to make change really effective and strong, sort of. And the first one is like, you have to have a vision of where we're heading. You have to have a plan how to get there, and you have to have like resources to get there, and you also have to have skills. And the last thing is that you have to have incentives. If you don't have these in place, so this model kind of shows is a visual. Maybe you can link to it in the description or something like that. But for example, if you don't have a vision, there will be confusion. And if you don't have the skills, people will get an anxiety. They don't know how to do. If they don't have an incentive, if they don't get anything from doing this, there will be resistance. They will, why should I do this? And if you don't have the resources like time, money, and people, there will be frustration. That's for sure. And if you don't have that action plan on how to get there, there will be a false start. And I think this is usually, you can take your situation and map it out here and say, do we have a vision? Yes or no? And if we don't have it, there will be confusion. So we kind of use this on the smallest to the biggest projects, because even if you have a small project, it has to align with the vision, right? If the vision for the company is we're going to rule the world, your idea needs to support that vision. And if the idea is about building a spaceship, if you are having a zoo right now, you probably don't have knowledge about building a spaceship. So you if you don't have the skills, you kind of have to work on that. So that's how it works. And when it comes to innovation, it's very popular now. And I said it in the beginning as well, that you have to use all the resources you have in the company. Now that people have time, work with open innovation. Yes, but you have to have incentives in place for people to contribute. Otherwise, they will, be very resistant. So I think, look into this plan, make it your own. Take away a few parts if you want to, but start with this one and try to map out your situation. So, for example, as you said, what's your take on the situation right now when it comes to innovation and companies and working remote? Yeah, most companies doesn't have a plan for it, and that's why it's false starts. They're running around like chickens, and they don't know why they're doing it. And then when the ones that are in place and have all the systems and they have a plan, if people don't have the skills, they will be messy. So I think it's a good model. So I recommend people to look at it and use it.
Definitely. You first introduced me to the model, and it's like building blocks. I will link to all of that in the show notes,
it's very
so
visual.
you can look at it for yourself. It's very visual, but it is like building blocks. If you don't have one, you might struggle with the other. I'm very appreciative of the time that you've dedicated to us. Final question. How people can find you if they've got any questions, if they want to reach out or just want to say thank you for the awesome advice that you've given
I
them.
think, either they can mail me at fredrik@houseofsparks.com, or they can add me on LinkedIn. It's Fredrik Heghammar, or Fredrik Heghammar as it is in Swedish.
I'll include all your contact details if that's
Absolutely,
with you
absolutely.
in the show notes again, so people can find you. And that's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, because I think the best change is to learn something. So I happily share my knowledge, because when I do, I always learn something. So today I learned about this new tool, Zencaster. So you always learn something, right?
Exactly. Well, I'm glad that you could learn something a tiny little bit from me. And absolutely, Zencaster is a fantastic tool for podcasters. So if anyone is thinking of going into digital production of podcasts, highly recommend it. Beautiful tool. Right. Again, fantastic level of knowledge and detail that I'm sure will come in handy for everyone. We've got your contact details, and it's been absolute joy to have you. Thank you very much for coming on, and I'll let you get on because I know that you've got deadlines.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
One more thing before you take off. Nextep Group offers premium level support across a diverse range of remote work issues, 24 hours a day and in multiple languages, with experts in HR, legal, operations, tech, leadership, and more. It's open to leaders looking for guidance, consultants, and remote workers wanting to share their experience. You can join by visiting www.nextep.group. This podcast is produced and hosted by Lech Guzowski from Human PM. Special thanks to the founders of the Nextep Group, Christina Barger, Jelaine Chan, Stefan Dorn, and Matteo Grassi.